Welcome back. We have a reporter roundtable today. Two veteran journalists covering the ins and outs of Florida government and those who run it.
And they have had their hands full in Tallahassee. We're glad to welcome Mary Ellen Klas, Capitol Bureau Chief for the Miami Herald, Neiman Fellowship winner. Also with us, Gary Fineout, an old friend, veteran reporter with Politico, writes the daily Politico Florida playbook. Gary, Mary Ellen, welcome. Glad to have you.
Good morning.
Good to be here.
Yeah, Mary Ellen, let me begin with you. The governor clearly for the last couple of weeks has been lying low, trying to stay out of public view, avoid people like you two. On Tuesday, when the legislature had that swearing-in ceremony, I guess he ducked out a side door. I know, Mary Ellen, you wrote a good piece for the Herald. You've got lots of questions to ask him. When is he going to sort of sit still and answer some?
You know, I think it's a testament to the fact that they don't think that this election cycle really was about COVID. You know, there are a lot of unanswered questions about that, and it's really uncanny. It's a little bit like President Trump has scarcely appeared in public or made any remarks in person, so has the governor. And prior to the election, much of his schedule mirrored some of the messaging of the president, and that continues now after the election. So, you know, we have a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot of important things as this virus continues to spike in the state and the vaccine continues to be an option. You know, we just don't have answers. So I think the governor choosing to go to Washington, and then instead of meeting with us, he did a video and put that on social media. And that way he gets to control the message, but he doesn't get to control the questions.
You know, Mary Ellen, that was what I think is so noticeable about that, because that's actually then Governor Rick Scott had a very similar pattern. But what's so noticeable now about Governor DeSantis is that at the beginning, over the past year, almost every day, especially over the last few months prior to the election, he had a big announcement every day somewhere and was actually very accessible to the press. And I think that's why this week has been so unusual. But you talked about this being an election about COVID. Gary, do you think this election was about COVID?
Well, somewhat. I mean, I think it can be argued that, of course, what happened ultimately and the fact that Joe Biden has won was due greatly to COVID. I think obviously what happened in places around Florida, including South Florida, clearly the election was not about COVID. It was about the economy and about the messaging related to socialism and that sort. I mean, the best I can view is what's going on is that Governor DeSantis is sort of, I guess, hoping that things will somehow die down and that he won't have to answer questions about those comments he made about Michigan and Pennsylvania legislatures intervening in the election. He's not going to have to answer questions about hiring decisions or the fact that some places there aren't hiring. Like we currently don't have anyone in charge of the department that regulates hospitals. I mean, it's things of that nature, all these things that are going on, and they have just decided to sort of keep a low profile. Now, I mean, what's odd about this is that right now, despite everything, DeSantis is in a very formidable position heading into his reelection campaign.
Yeah.
So it's not like there is lined up on the other side a battery of Democrats who are going to be prepared to take him on, or at least have the resources to take him on.
Right.
And furthermore, it's just, you know, with what happened this past cycle, you can argue that the Republicans are in a very strong position. So I don't quite understand the strategy of just not saying anything.
Yeah. And of course, President Trump the other day at the White House, in a rare appearance, gave the governor a big attaboy for his work down here. Mary Ellen, let's talk a little bit about how the vaccines are going to be distributed. What is your understanding? Is it going to be up to the State Department of Health, up to the governor? Who's going to decide the order and who gets the vaccines and how they get handed out?
Well, the CDC required that the states put together a distribution plan in early October. We got a copy of that plan, and it's very vague. At this point, they've identified who they think should be the first recipients, and there's about 3.5 million people that, when you add it up, who might be the first people to get this. It would be healthcare providers, emergency first responders, and the vulnerable in nursing homes. Now, Pfizer has said it's going to send about 1 million doses to Florida, and because it needs these super cold conditions, it's identified hospitals. But there's so many questions now. It looks like Jackson Memorial, Broward Medical will be among the hospitals that will get these first doses. But who decides among them? If you've got 3.5 million people in Florida who might be on the list, and you're only getting 1 million doses, those are some important questions. It's essentially rationing, and we need to, get some transparency as to how they're going to figure this out. There are so many unanswered questions, and that remains unknown.
Gary, you want to weigh in? You have any insight on that?
Well, no, I think Mary Ellen's, correct in terms of, what we anticipated is that it was going to be the people in the nursing homes and the frontline first responders were going to be the ones who are at the front of the line. But yes, there hasn't been a lot of clarity since then. That video message by the governor, 5 minutes worth. Which again is just fascinating, is that earlier in this crisis, he was having these roundtables and he's spending an hour discussing issues involving COVID-19. And so it's sort of odd that he would just have a 5-minute sort of presentation and then, not go into any further details. So I think there are a lot of questions. And other questions like the state surgeon general is like nowhere to be found. He's not been out in public. He's been doing weekly calls with some of the healthcare providers, but still, we've not really heard from him. And clearly what's happening is that from the state standpoint, the only person who apparently is authorized to give information for the most part is the governor, but the governor's not talking. So there we are.
So there we are.
All right, feel the frustration there.
We have more questions, things like herd immunity, that theory, which the governor is pursuing. So stick with us. We'll be right back with more Roundtable. We are glad you are with us for one more segment of our Roundtable with Mary Ellen Klas, Miami Herald Bureau Chief, Tallahassee, and Gary Fineout from Politico. Gary, let me ask you, you brought up the subject of the state surgeon general, who has really been sort of missing in action here for a number of months. The governor has been listening to Dr. Scott Atlas, who is a chief advisor to President Trump, who is advancing this herd immunity approach to dealing with coronavirus. Is he still influencing the governor? Is herd immunity the way the governor is going?
Well, I think there are those who believe that is what the governor is pursuing. There's certainly a lot of signs to indicate that they are not being as aggressive as responding to it as some of the other places. We see what's going on in other states. In California's governor imposed a curfew. You have things going on in various other states where they're trying to tackle an ongoing surge. And we really don't know what the game plan is, other than the governor has vowed repeatedly that he's not going to have reinstitute a lockdown. I think the only nod to the ongoing crisis that we've sort of had is that we did have the education commissioner this week say that they will continue to do remote learning in the spring semester. However, there's a lot of details there that have not yet been disclosed, including how will districts get funded? Will they continue to get funded at the same rate if they allow parents to opt to keep their kids out? So certainly the signs indicate that there isn't this sort of aggressive response that is going on in other states amid what's happening. So one could posit the position. And obviously I know that Miami Beach Mayor Dan Gelber has said point blank that he believes that the governor is pursuing herd immunity. And I know that Mary Ellen and the Miami Herald have done some stories that have also sort of positioned everything that way. Now, has the governor flat out said that? No. Have we seen Mr. Atlas in recent weeks? No. But again, it's clear throughout this entire crisis that they have taken their cues largely from the White House, and they've tried to be in sync on everything. So again, there you are.
Actually, we have, I know, Mary Ellen, you've reported on this so much. We've heard several times from Fred Piccolo, who is the chief communications person for Governor DeSantis, who flat out says, no, 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 heck no, herd immunity is not our policy. I mean, he's put that out there pretty strongly.
Right.
Mary
Right.
Ellen, will you weigh in? I know you've done such extensive reporting on this.
Yeah, well, the problem is that herd immunity has become a politicized term, so it's probably best to just kind of avoid that. The governor has pursued an open everything policy, and in exchange, the question is, what has he done to prevent contagion? And they argue that they are doing a lot to protect the vulnerable. Well, when you look at the numbers, since the beginning, the first 2 weeks of October, there was a 140% increase in people who are over age 65 who were testing positive for COVID. Now, that is the age group that is perceived as the most vulnerable. So if the state is indeed protecting the vulnerable, it's not doing a very good job of it. So whether or not this is herd immunity, we don't know. Now, when you talk about immunity, it's important to remember that in order to achieve what they call community immunity, where everybody is safe from it because so many of the people have an immunity, you need 3/4 of the population to be either have antibodies or have the vaccine. That means 70% of Floridians. Now, 75% of Floridians. The question is, how do we get to that point if we're going to put all our eggs in the vaccine basket? And that is, when you look at immunity during a flu season, Florida has a pretty bad record. Hardly 50% of the population even gets vaccinated during a flu season. So how are we going to ramp up? Those are many of the questions that I think this administration needs to do a better job of answering. And, there's also the whole issue when it comes to vaccines of, do people trust them? And I have actually had some high-level people within this administration who have said, no way I'm going to take a vaccine. So if that's happening within this administration, why, where's the doubt? Aren't we seeding doubt within people? And it seems to me that there needs to be more of an education campaign by the White House. And, if we really are going to pursue vaccine immunity.
Mary Ellen, we're going to have to leave it right there. We're out of time. We're grateful that you joined us this morning. Gary Fineout, Mary Ellen Klas, thanks very much.
Great to see you both.